Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mental Insights Podcast with your host, Brendan.cutuli. Today's episode is episode number 25 of the Mental Insights Podcast with Audrey Grunst. Audrey is a licensed clinical social worker. Audrey is the owner and a therapist at SheBe Counseling, which is based in Vernon Hills, Illinois. Audrey earned her MSW at Loyola University Chicago. Audrey has over 10 years of clinical experience within business and the mental health background. She has presented to over 100 different schools, nonprofits, and conferences about topics within mental health such as emotional intelligence and anxiety management. She is also the owner of SheBe, which is an online community for female athletes, and she is also a mental performance coach for Northwestern's women's volleyball program. Audrey was a D1 volleyball player in college, so she has firsthand knowledge of the experience between physical health and mental health within an athlete in a high-intensity team and environment. From SheBe, what you can expect is a monthly training guide, a weekly live Q&A, and some bonus meditation and pep talks, along with a posting forum where you can communicate with everyone within the SheBe community, so you can hear more from the owners, Audrey and Kelly. Audrey provides a lot of great insights into the mindset and awareness about mental health that a young adult athlete needs to have, and steps to improve your mental health throughout this transition. Audrey assists and leads others to a positive lifestyle and mental health routine. It was such a pleasure to have Audrey on for this episode of the Mental Insights Podcast. I hope you all enjoy the episode. And before, I want to apologize for the audio on my end of this episode. There was some audio quality issues, so I hope you're able to still listen and hear a clear and concise interview between Audrey and I. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. So thank you, Audrey Grunst, for being here on the Mental Insights Podcast. This is episode number 25 of the Mental Insights Podcast. To really get started, a question that I like to ask my guests is, when did you first experience, or when were you first aware of mental health and the challenges that may face within your life today?
I think what I noticed a lot was in my early 20s when I was in college, and I was going through my own process and journey of getting support, and I didn't know where to turn or how to do that. And for me, I realized that looking back, I, like a lot of 20-year-olds, don't know where to go and what to do when they're struggling. And I found out about the mental health world through a lot of Googling and searching and kind of looking into what a therapist was and even what credentials each therapist has, because there's different therapists that have different credentials, and trying to figure out what all that means, and doing that without an adult and without really any support, because I didn't want to tell anyone that I needed help.
Definitely, I can relate to that as well. I think the shock that comes into play within your life when you go to college is definitely a very big stepping stone to face. It definitely offers a lot of challenges for people, on top of just the ability, like you were saying, of not feeling comfortable or strong enough to reach out to someone else, which I think is a big predicament within mental health today. Why don't you speak about the relationship that your own physical injury had within your mental health?
Yeah, so I was a Division I volleyball player at Loyola Chicago, and I had a really great first 2 years in my volleyball career at Loyola. I was starting, I was getting great stats, and we went to the NCAA tournament. Things were really great for me. And for all of those reasons, I was really happy and doing well because my identity was full. I knew exactly who I was and what I wanted to do, which in my opinion, when your heart is full and your identity is clear, that's a pretty good place to be in life because I've learned that that doesn't always take place 100% in our life. And what happened was I had a serious injury. I have chronic compartment syndrome. And what that means is that I can overexercise my body really quickly and cause some significant damage to the muscles in my shins and the bone, my shins, and then also the muscle in my legs. And what happened was I had one surgery in high school that was okay. The second surgery in college wasn't okay. And I didn't recover the way that I was expected to. And ultimately, where my story kind of ends, but kind of begins, is that I took a medical release from my volleyball team, and the NCAA gave the scholarship kind of back to Loyola because when you have a team of 12 full scholarships, you don't want to be injured and take one of those away and leave the team with 11. So we had to do some coordination to make sure that my scholarship was still covered under a medical act and that Loyola didn't suffer. So through that process, I found myself no longer an athlete, no longer a teammate, and I did some coach's assistant and management on the side, but I had a lot of time on my hands, and I literally went to the doctor one day, and the next 2 hours I went to a game where I was supposed to suit up and play, and I pulled my coach aside and said I was done. So it was literally in a flash. This all happened to me, and I did not understand mentally what was going to be ahead and how I would suffer for anxiety and depression after that. And what happened was I had too much time on my hands, and I needed to find out what I needed to do to cope. And of course, it would make sense to go to a therapist right away and get some support, but that was never offered. That was never a solution. No one asked. I didn't know. So I use a coping skill that I use a lot, which is to stay too busy and overschedule myself as a coping mechanism to distract. So I ended up volunteering at a children's hospital in Chicago in their psych department. And actually, through my coping skill of staying busy, I witnessed what an LCSW does in Illinois, a licensed clinical social worker. And I realized that one, I probably needed to see her, and two, I wanted to be her. So it was a very serendipitous moment, but it honestly was not a pretty journey what I suffered. I mean, the anxiety I had at night resulted in severe hives, and they would go away in the morning, and I'd go to the doctor, and the doctor had no evidence that I was having skin rashes. And so he would send me away, and then I would get them at the same time every night. And finally, I wised up and took pictures of them, and I had to go on a full round of steroids to get rid of them. And my physical body was manifesting my stress, and I still didn't know that at the time. This is all hindsight.
It's incredible what you can begin to realize after the fact, and it takes you a long time to become aware of, these instances, especially like the rashes, and understanding how your mentality, how your mindset is changing a lot of what's going on physically, but as well emotionally. To touch on what you spoke about a little bit, for me, my coping mechanism was as well, staying busy and staying active. But what I didn't realize that was basically sports was kind of a way that it was not necessarily, it was kind of my escape rather than, a really great expression of my emotions. And I ended up, that was one reason why I quit soccer in college, because I knew that if I was playing soccer 6 days a week, and I was going through school, I wouldn't necessarily have the time to focus on my mental health. And that's where I realized that I can't really focus on staying active and doing all this if I didn't focus on my own mental health. So I relate to that a lot. And now I'm insanely busy, but I know what's truly best for me and how I can, use these coping mechanisms. So it's really important to know what's best for you and, what may look well to keep you active and healthy, but it's not necessarily, helping you in the long run per se.
Mm-hmm.
As well, speaking about the connection between, physical health and mental health, it's definitely a very big topic today because you look at a physical injury and then you look at a mental injury and the comparisons are, not within the same conversation at all. How did what was your interpretation of how people sought out resources for your physical injury compared to when you started to reach out in terms of your own mental health?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I remember the physical parts of what was going on with me were really easy to get support from. And I had a ton of resources. I had an athletic trainer, strength and conditioning coach, nutritionist, medical doctor, surgeon, primary physician, and more. Assistant coach, head coach, teammates. I probably had at least 20 to 30 people who were involved in my physical injury. And when I, within a blink of an eye, took a medical release, I had no one. And I, looking back, realized that I am very competent and confident. And I think a lot of people in my life assumed that I was going to be able to handle it. And because I didn't express anything, they just didn't ask. And we all just moved forward. And it was like I was on planet Mars, that in my mind, I was going through all these things and I was suffering and I was living in a completely different world in my head that I was living just 24 hours before that. But everyone else was acting the same. No one thought that what happened to me was a complete change in every cell of my body. And sort of to their defense, I didn't express any of that. I didn't show any of that because as an athlete, you're taught to act a certain way and show up a certain way and not be weak. And I think that was in my nature. So it's a catch-22 because I really needed help and I needed someone to help me, yet I didn't ask for it. I didn't express it. And even the hives on my body, I was convinced that I was allergic to something in my dorm room. I mean, it would have taken a therapist to connect these dots for me, but I wasn't seeing a therapist at the time. I was just trying to figure out how to do this on my own. And that question is really insightful and really eye-opening to me, that I just went from a team of 20 to a team of 0. And that's really, that's just sad.
I completely agree. It definitely is. And, that's why I brought it up, because it's the way that we view each side of an injury is so different. And it does have to do with, obviously, the first step of reaching out, of lending out your hand and saying, I need it, which is definitely, I believe, for mental health, for, any type of hard challenge or, drug addiction, it's reaching out, which is always the hardest for someone to do. One, necessarily because, like you're saying, you could make these presumptions that you aren't struggling, and you make these, try to make, these realizations that you aren't actually sick or you aren't actually injured, or you don't necessarily want the help because you don't think you can get the help. There's many different scenarios as to why someone would really not want to reach out and not have the support to do so. For yourself, what made you really gain that courage and gain that strength to reach out? And talk us through that process of, that change throughout your life from the second that you reached out and asked for the help that you needed.
Yeah, I was educated when I went to the psych hospital and I was volunteering there, and I saw when LCSW did, that was a level of education that helped me in my Google searches, because now I knew what to Google. And so I could Google LCSW in Chicago. And that is honestly how I figured it out. And it is so serendipitous because I am an LCSW myself now. But looking back, it was these series of good luck and bad luck events that led me from one step to the other. And I reached out to a woman who worked at a local church down from my school because it was free. And that was really important for me because I had an insurance that wouldn't cover it outside of my network, and I was really far away from home. So I needed something free, or what they call a sliding scale. So you can look for a treatment center or a church center or a synagogue or anything, and they'll do free services, or they'll do what you can call a sliding scale, which you call and you say, I can afford $5, $10, because when you pay for your counseling, you tend to have more investment. So it can be a good idea for you to spend what you can on the counseling because it commits you to it. So I did a sliding scale, probably less than $10. And I went to a church, and I remember walking through the hallways and just so uncomfortable, just thinking I was going to go see some weird shrink in a weird corner of a weird church. And I remember sitting down in the waiting room, and it was just a really normal church sort of main room. And she came out and she looked really normal, which was good. And we sat on her couch, and I still can think about where the couch was in terms of the window, because the couch was facing away from the window. And I remember looking at it, and she had a chair. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I can't sit in her chair because if people see me through the window, they're going to know I'm here. So I bolted to the couch. And so I think that speaks to how when you're new to counseling, you're just very hyper aware of everything going on. I'm happy to say years later, it's the last thing I'm thinking about, because seeing a therapist to me is just like going to see my doctor, for my vaccines or like whatever. It just is this routine that I have no emotions about, insecurities about. But I just remember having so many emotions about it. And at the end of the session, I felt so much better. And I looked back and thought, why did I not do this sooner? Why did I just suffer for all that time? And so I think it just speaks to this hype that we have around what a therapist looks like and what the office looks like and what people are going to think. And I feel as if most people, after 50 minutes of a session, they just completely drop their shoulders, they relax, and they want to come back. I mean, it's a really therapeutic, great place to spend some time on yourself.
Definitely, I agree. As I've been speaking with others, I think one of the best messages that I could have is therapy is truly for everyone. Everyone can take the time to speak through their emotions, speak through their past experiences in order to grow and change the way that they live. I think therapy doesn't necessarily need to be, focused on exactly on improving yourself, but it could just be a way to share with someone else in a comfortable environment that allows you to freely express yourself and, work throughout any type of, issues or just topics that you'd like to. I think the environment, obviously needs to be talked about differently because like you were saying, the first instance of when you seek out therapy, it's always, you have this dark cloud around it of, it's not going to be the right thing or you're not going to like it. It's definitely something that, you need to evaluate different therapists and different professionals to see what's best for you. Not everybody is a talking person. There's different types of, there's EMDR, there's different types of, bodily, therapeutic measures that people can take. So there's definitely opportunity out there for everybody, but it's, making that first step. Like you said, the first session will drop all the weight on your shoulder. It'll release everything and it'll allow you to feel more comfortable with yourself. in terms of the impact that therapy had on yourself, can you share a little bit about the perspective change or the mindset change that it had within you focusing on your own mental health?
Yeah, for me, when I go to therapy still, so I see a therapist every Tuesday, and I go unless I'm out of town because I think it's an important appointment to have every week. And a lot of the therapy that has worked for me is a perspective change and a way to look at something from a different angle. And it's a lot of a conversation. It's not challenges, it's not disagreements, it's not making me feel bad about the decisions I've made, but it's the approach of the therapist that I have is curious. She asks great questions. She asks me, have you thought about it this way? Have you thought about it that way? And I am very driven and stubborn, and I can work with blinders on a little bit and think that my way is the right way. And she has a very subtle way of kind of widening my blinders so I can see other perspectives. But she doesn't make me feel bad about the blinders, because what I think a lot of times happens when we're growing up or we're being coached is everyone's telling us what we're doing wrong. And her saying, it's wrong that you have these blinders on and you see narrow. Take the blinders off. Those blinders are bad. That's not helpful, but that's the advice we get a lot as we're growing up. And she talks about the blinders as, why do you think you have those? How have they served you well? How have they not served you well? How do you open up the blinders to see a different perspective and see someone else's perspective so that you can be more open-minded? And so we talk about the blinders not as the enemy, but as something that I've done my whole life. And sometimes it's served me well, and sometimes it hasn't served me well. So it's increasing this idea of flexible thinking and also gaining insight and self-awareness about why I do what I do and making choices about, do I want to change that? Do I want to let them go? Do I want to talk about them in a way that is silly, right? Like, we don't actually have blinders when we walk around. But if you talk about them enough, you create a context, and then it's easier to make changes when you have a context. So I use a ton of metaphors and storytelling and examples about our mental health and our emotions that are tangible objects, because it's easier to understand. If you are really stressed and you have a 200-pound backpack on your back filled with stuff, in the session, I want to take one of those things out of the backpack and talk about. And when you pick it out, what is it? Is it a book? Is it food? Is it just a huge 10-pound weight? And then I kind of dig in with the metaphors, and my counselor and my therapist, she knows that about me, and she's then taken that on and helped me. So she knows what works for me, and then she takes it and goes with it. It's a very creative process.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It's definitely a great way to hear that, you go throughout that process, because the one thing that I've spoken a good deal on my podcast is that process of questions rather than directing, an answer or the reason why something is wrong. It's something that happens a lot throughout your childhood, like you were saying, and that's a way that parents really try to control and show you the right way, which does seem to have a lot of negative behavioral responses down the line within your life. That's one thing that I've been starting to learn and come more aware of, is asking questions really allows for the person to see the true answer and learn, what the right way to go about it in the future is. So I think that's so valuable to speak about, because if someone's only directed an answer and not told necessarily why, they may repeat that behavior, they may repeat that thought or that action down the road, and they might not necessarily even know as to why they're doing it or why they're repeating this behavior. So it's a great conversation to have, and I'm glad that you spoke about your therapist doing that. And also the topic of you still going to therapy. I think that's one thing that's a great, thing to bring up as well, is you being an LCSW, yet still seeking out the conversation with another person, because like I was saying, we still all need that conversation. Like you said yourself, you weren't able to notice that you had these blinders on as you were going throughout. And I think that's something that definitely needs to, continue to be of conversation, is that if you're still a mentally healthy person, if you still know all the right answers, you still may perform a lot of these, thoughts, behaviors, and actions that were still a negative aspect of your past, which I think is so important, because everybody has flaws, and we're not going to be able to fix ourselves throughout a day just because we know the answers. So,
oh yeah, I don't know. I may know the textbook answers, and that's very objective, but that doesn't mean that I apply them to my life. And I'm a super real, normal human, and I totally wear that and show that to my clients. And I think for me to be on the other side of the couch is so important, because if your office smells that day, as a therapist, I'm going to think about how my office smells. If the pillow looks dirty and I'm sitting on the couch and the pillow looks dirty, I'm thinking about all these other people who had this pillow next to them. If I feel gross in her office, I can't be calm and talking about what's going on with me. So I go to work and I look at my pillows, or I smell my office. And to be on the other side of the couch is, in my opinion, it has to happen. Because if it's not happening, you are completely missing a perspective that could change someone's life, because I can understand where they're sitting. Is it facing the window? I've been there before. Where they're sitting, is the pillow dirty? Does something smell different in my office? Are they wondering if I'm wearing a different perfume? All these things that we do as a client, or if my therapist, if she's not wearing makeup one day, I'm curious about why she's not wearing makeup, and if she's having a bad day, and if she's upset. And so if I don't wear makeup to work one day and my clients notice, then they probably, so I guess that dual perspective has really just made me more of a dynamic therapist.
That's awesome. That definitely seems to bring out a great, side of how you're able to go through your practice. I think perspective change throughout, any different scenario will offer the most benefit. I think perspective was one of the things that helped change my mental health first and foremost, because, like most people, we do have those blinders. We do think, our way is the right way, which isn't the case. And as you go through therapy, as you go through these sessions with a professional, you start to understand that you've been acting and thinking, ways that you could certainly improve on. So I'm glad you brought that up. To speak more about the work that you're doing now, I shared a little bit about SheBe in the introduction. Can you speak a little bit more about what it is and what we can look forward to in terms of its release coming soon, and just give a general insight into what it is as a whole and what people can look forward to?
Yeah, SheBe is a online and in-person service for female athletes that go beyond the physical, and we focus a lot on mental performance, mental wellness, and mental health. And we use the evidence-based stuff such as CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and using a lot of basic skills, but we tweak them and we refine them into a way that is digestible and tangible for an athlete on the go and who's active. And we do 8 clinics a year in person called the Head and Heart Clinic. And we go around to sports clubs and high schools and colleges, and we do emotional intelligence and do the beyond the physical training in person. And then outside of those 8 sessions, we are digital. So we have a website and soon to be app that it can be a SheBe on the go, and making sure that they can log in and have coping skills at their fingertips straight from the words and the techniques that I have. And the trainings are actually really amazing. They're my partner Kelly and I, and it's us training them in 10 to 20 minute videos with really fun, tangible tips and skills to cope with their mental wellness, but also her and I kind of bantering in the background. So you get to know us. We want to be mentors to the girls. We want them to feel like they know us. And we're weaving in some really important skills that don't feel like a lecture. They don't feel like a worksheet. It's supposed to be almost like a podcast, but a little bit more specific in the skills. And every month we get new curated videos up. So the membership that they have inside the app always has fresh information. It's really innovative and different. The sports field really hasn't seen anything like this.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's something that is definitely a value, like you're saying. It's something that you don't normally see. And that connection for physical and mental health, I think, is so important, especially for athletes. That's, one reason why I stopped my sports career is due to the fact that I didn't have the resources for it. So I really ended up leading towards my mental health as being my primary target. For someone, that may not be experiencing a mental health challenge that is going throughout their collegiate career, what can they expect to gain from this? Speak a little bit about emotional intelligence and, what are some of these skills? What can they offer someone who may not necessarily, have mental health challenge, but how can they benefit from this?
Yeah, so it's not mental health in the traditional form designed for specific diagnoses like anxiety disorder or depression disorder. So it's designed for a spectrum of anxiety, super mild, all the way to someone who might have a diagnosis but should still be in therapy. So this does not replace therapy. It's really supposed to be proactive, maybe preventative, and giving kids the skills that are really tangible. So the app is going to be available as young as 12 years old all the way through. And we're focusing on narratives and storytelling and metaphors and funny little things here and there so that it keeps the girl listening, because we know they're busy and we know that we only have a couple of minutes to get their attention so that they continue to listen. So we weave it into a really friendly conversation that feels, it's funny. It's just funny. But then if you were at the end of the training video to write down 3 takeaways, you would be very clear what the takeaways are. So one of the takeaways, for example, could be body language. So the awareness of when you break eye contact, your body language starts to go downhill. So one of the takeaways is make eye contact with your teammates 5 times more than you normally would. So count 5 times where you intentionally made eye contact. That's going to change your body language. That will be an easy takeaway that you're going to get throughout the banter, throughout the discussion, throughout the conversation between her and I. And the videos are going to be visually appealing. So you can see text words, you can see images that correspond with what we're teaching. So it's going to be really dynamic. And it's going to be something that every month is a new topic. So in August, we're talking about anxiety and mindfulness. The next month after that, we're talking about positive psychology. So each month is a new topic, and then all of our videos are going to be curated on that topic. And for someone who can't pay for our membership, they can find us on our Facebook page, and we give a good portion of our community information. We give a good portion of that for free on Facebook as lives that are going to be recorded and saved. What they won't get in the membership, they get a community forum. They get to talk to us. They get to chat us. They get to ask us questions. Like, they get that interaction as much as they want. On Facebook, they'll get the part of the videos and the training. So we want to make these training videos and information accessible and free, because mental wellness shouldn't be just for someone who can afford it. It really should be for everybody. And so people that find us on Facebook and Instagram, they're definitely going to get a good portion of value information. If they want to then go buy the extra level, they can. But we want to make sure we're treating both.
That's awesome. And I'll make sure to have the links towards that work so we can make sure that people can get associated with the Facebook group and as well with SheBe to see more about when the app's going to be released. And in terms of the app, I love how you're having, you're speaking about after the video, what did they get out of it? What did they learn from it? In terms of the app, is there a way that people fill out these, questionnaires at the end of a video, or is it more that they write elsewhere outside of the app? Could you share a little bit more about that process?
Yeah, so the app has a page where they can watch all of the training videos that are released every other week. And then the app also has a posting forum that is a lot like a Facebook post where you comment and then people can comment on your post. And I can link articles to them. I can link videos to them. So I'm going to be moderating the forum where they can interact with us and other girls to make sure that they're going back and forth and they're talking about the videos or kind of whatever is going on. And we have some things in place to make sure that the safety of the girls is our number one priority. And so we have the parents' contact information in the background, and we don't promise confidentiality. So if we have a concern or a question, we will quickly go to the parent, because this is not a mental health counseling platform at all. And so it's almost as if you post anything, anyone can read it. Therefore, we can contact the parents without having to go through a lot of the steps that I would have to go through if it were to be in my counseling practice at SheBe.
Definitely, that's great. That's so important as you go throughout the process of making sure that people are safe and you have the best interest in their mind, and in their body as well. I think SheBe is a great way to continue to lead a mentally healthy collegiate athlete. It's definitely something that I think is slightly gaining traction now, but it's definitely something that's not had the resources that they can. You were speaking about having 20 professionals with you for a physical injury, but 0 for a mental health condition. As you look throughout many colleges today, I'd assume it's still the same. Even if you look at professional sports, this is a large topic today. Within the NBA, I believe, within the past 5 years, they've just started to implement mental health professionals to travel with teams.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you think about that, it's truly mind-blowing that, at the start of it, they would always have a physical health professional with them and with the team to help any type of athlete, but slowly we're able to implement these mental health professionals because it's definitely a large proponent for what people are struggling with today. It's about 1 in 5 Americans today, and I believe that statistic runs throughout a lot of countries elsewhere, of those who are struggling from a mental health condition. It's definitely something that we need to start to become aware of.
I think what we're trying to do, to your point of how do we provide mental health or mental wellness support, not just in an office, but traveling with the teams or being available and accessible to a really active person, because athletes are so busy and overscheduled. How do we fix that? Because at SheBe, the counseling center that I have, it's hard to get the athlete in because of their schedule. So SheBe found a problem and is trying to solve it by having that wellness factor curated by a professional and 2 former Division I athletes, and it being for the girl on the go. And it's for collegiate girls, of course, but we're really expecting and hoping that we're getting access to the 12, 13, and 14-year-old girls that can download the app with their parents' permission and have it on subscription. So when they're having a bad day, they can find a 5-minute video in SheBe that talks about mind chatter, talks about anxiety, called the monkey mind. using these stories to help them gain insight, because you have to have self-awareness. Emotional intelligence first says you have to have self-awareness. So if we talk about a monkey mind to a 12-year-old, she's going to get it. And then we're going to help her tame the monkey, and she's going to realize that she has control of her thoughts. And hopefully after 5 minutes, she's walking away with something, and she didn't have to tell anyone that she listened to it. She doesn't have to go to an office and spend money and time and energy traveling. She can just pop in her headphones. And so we think that this is going to really change the way that girls understand themselves. And really, hopefully, it's sitting next to Instagram and they're looking at SheBe and looking at Instagram, and it's not about the social media overwhelming them and making them sad, but there's like a SheBe app in there that can counterbalance all these things that are happening to girls. And so it's such a dream of mine, and we can't wait to see what it's going to do, because there's no model. We don't have an example. Like, we're making this up from the ground up.
That's awesome. That's so exciting. I truly do love the idea, because it's such a tangible thing to have for people. Like you were saying, whether it's for the athlete walking to and from practice, or whether they're on the bus, they can watch these videos and listen to these videos very quickly. Or whether it's the child who, is walking to school, or, they are sitting at home, whether they're about to go to bed, these are videos that are quick and concise, that can offer, the perspective that people need, which is so important. And especially within young women today, it's a valuable topic that we need to have. And I love that it's such a easy and, applicable thing to have, like you were saying, and true. It's like if someone opens up their phone and they're constantly going through social media and so forth, maybe this habit changes to SheBe. Maybe instead of them going to one of these social media apps, it's, I could either read about what my friends, or visualize what my friends have done for the past, day or two, or I can learn from a 5 to 10 minute informational video about, how I can work on myself today. So it's a great option for people to have.
Yeah. SheBe healthy, right? SheBe pick and SheBe. Like, SheBe was a name that we created very intentionally. And it came from Zeus's youngest daughter, Hebe. And we were looking at inspiring women that we wanted to emulate in our business. And we were looking at goddesses, and we saw Hebe, and we said, Hebe needs to be a SheBe. And so then it was Kelly and I bantering and being weird, because we've been friends for 20 years, and we became friends through a sport, volleyball. And I'm actually recording her in her house right now. I'm in Minnesota working on SheBe, and I live in Illinois. And so we will SheBe powerful, SheBe who she want to be, SheBe in control, SheBe she. And so we're trying to create this sort of like lifestyle and attitude to it, where, and even like our logo, we have like these amazing girls with an upside down heart over their heart, which is our logo, and saying SheBe loved, SheBe in control, and trying to create this desire to want to be a SheBe girl, and creating that identity. Because, to come full circle is that I lost my identity when I was an athlete and got injured, and Kelly lost hers after playing 4 years at a very impressive school at Minnesota, being a middle blocker. And who are you after all of that? And so if we can get to those 12-year-old girls to create an identity of a SheBe girl throughout their life, they will be so much more resilient than what we were. And we're young moms. We see what we want to do for our daughters, and all of this just makes way too much sense to not do it. And so we're just excited to see this grow. We are going to start taking memberships in September, and the app will be out right after that. But because there's no app, we can still do a homepage icon on people's phones pretty easily, and it acts as the same thing. So we're gonna roll it out in phases, because we're just too excited to wait.
That's awesome. It's so exciting to hear that, and I look forward to the app coming out. I think it'll be so informational for a lot of young women today. And I'll make sure to really push that message and that application for people to check out and to use, because I definitely think it'll be of value for a lot of people.
We're taking a wait list, so anyone can go to our website, www.shebeco.com, and click on the membership page and add themselves to the wait list. And so they'll be one of the first to know when our membership is open. And then if there's any coaches or parents listening who want a head and heart clinic to be in their school or in their club, we have just a few more spots for 2019 and 2020, and they can reach out to us on social media or by email on our website, and we can talk to them about doing a head and heart clinic in their hometown. And we'll go national. We like to travel. So we are going to be traveling to do a lot of our scheduled head and heart clinics already.
Awesome. Perfect. And we'll have those links below in the show notes so everyone can get associated and reach out to you for more details. In terms of, as we're speaking, you obviously are very passionate about helping others and about, using your experiences and your platform in order to shape the way that others live their lives within their future. Within that, what truly made you so passionate to help others? As you went through many of these challenges throughout your life and you started to understand what was best for you, what really inspired or motivated you to want to lead others in the same direction that maybe your therapists have led you into the, healthy and, positive mindset that you have today?
Yeah. That question is such a great question. And the way I want to answer it is this epiphany moment where I have this aha and everything, the curtains, unveiled this perfect scene. But really what I'm learning in my own therapy and growing up, just being 32 years old now, is that there's this sense of self-trust that I have an intuition that I've tapped into in my therapy and in my journaling and in who I am. And I feel more authentic every time I see a couple of options in front of me to, let's say, add this new part to my business. Like, let me see if I want to hire a new therapist, or do I want to hire a new manager, or do I want to take that money and create a scholarship for a client who can't afford therapy? Like, what do I want to do with this revenue or profit in my business? And so my therapist hears my business problem, and then she says, what does your gut tell you and why? So I make decisions in my life, whether it be my children or my family or my business, and I look at all my options, but then I think about, okay, what does my gut say and why does it say that? And I really just get curious about what my gut says. And sometimes my gut is wrong because I'm being too sensitive, or my gut is wrong because I am a bleeding heart and want to help everybody, but that wouldn't be good for all these other people. So for me, what I'm learning is to follow my gut and my intuition, kind of question it, get curious about it, and then make my best choice. And when my choice is wrong, again, like look at that and I figure out why it was wrong, and then I pivot. So I've been successful in these 32 years of a couple of businesses and a family, and everyone asks, how do you do all of that? And how do you manage the time? And why do you do all of that? And so it's kind of a similar question to what you ask. And my response is I organically do what my heart and my gut tell me to do, and I think it out logically, but I have this head and heart connection within me that I've really kind of mastered recently that has really helped me make clear decisions. But that has taken a lot of time and a lot of personal development to kind of get to. And I was not that when I was 20. So, being in counseling and being a counselor for 12 years, you learn a lot. And I'm just using my experiences to make my next best decision. But when I fail or make a mistake, I pick myself right back up and I pivot, and I don't worry too much about my failures or my mistakes. I just keep moving forward.
Great answer. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Before I ask my last question, I do want to just offer my thanks and gratitude towards you being here today. It was such a pleasure to have you on the Mental Insights podcast and have you share a little bit more about what you were able to experience and overcome, and as well what you're doing in order to lead others towards a healthier lifestyle to what you learned. I think it's very commendable to, everything that you've done thus far, and the future is certainly bright for you, Audrey. I think there's a lot more that you're going to do and a lot more people that you're going to continue to impact throughout your life. So thank you for being on here today.
Thank you.
So for my last question, it's really what I love to ask my guests. It's to imagine that you're writing a book for your whole life throughout, any experiences that you've had thus far. And what I want you to answer really is, within one chapter, I want it to encapsulate the past year or two of what you've experienced, what you've learned, and, what would this chapter be called, whether it was a lesson that you've learned or an experience that you had, and just share a little bit as to why that was impactful towards a chapter within your life book.
Yeah. So I would call it The Story of the Bee. And my brick and mortar counseling practice is called Simply Be, with 2 E's. And SheBe has E's. And I had a huge moment in 2016 when my daughter was born, and she was born with a lump with a cyst on the back of her head that really changed my perspective on life and career and family. And having a newborn who we were worried that may be sick and having concerns about her health and having a lot of questions, it led me to realize that I needed to be more flexible. I needed to have control over my life and my schedule, and I wasn't going to be able to do that at a 9-to-5 job that I was at. So I quit my job on maternity leave, and I opened my first counseling practice, which was just myself. And for a year, I saw a handful of clients, about 15 a week, while we took care of my daughter, and she ended up being fine and everything was normal and not a big deal, but you never know that in the first few months. And I went to a yoga retreat at the Himalayan Institute, and I was on this mountain that they call the Sound of Music. And I was sitting there realizing that I wanted to do more. I wanted to be more, and I wanted to do, but I also wanted to be and chill and calm. So I came home and I told my husband, I'm going to open up a group practice. I'm going to hire therapists so we can treat as many people as possible, and we're going to do nutrition and yoga with it. And he said, okay. And so then I thought about what I wanted that to look like, and working with someone who does branding, he really interviewed me and he dug in and he said, what do you want in the suburbs of Chicago? And I said, well, I want what I had at the Himalayan Institute. And he said, what was that? And I said, to simply be, to just be who you want to be in a suburb and feel the same way you feel on a mountain doing yoga. Why can't we do that here? And he said, yeah, simply be, like BEE. And I said, no, no, like BE. Because I am an evidence-based therapist, so I do take myself quite serious. And so he said, no, it's about the feel of a bee, and simply be with 2 E's. And so I said, yeah, because you know what? I call my daughter Jujubee, and she's the reason why I left my comfortable 9-to-5 to work for myself and own this business. So yeah, it has to be a bee. And so I opened the counseling practice Simply Be a 1.5 years ago, and now we treat over 200 people a week, and we do nutrition and yoga and counseling, and everybody loves the honeycombs in the office and the wood and the bee and SheBe and my daughter Jujubee. It's the life of a bee, and if you look up bees and how fascinating they are and what a community they are, it's just a beautiful symbol to how I try to live my life. And one bee doesn't make much of an impact, but when you do it within a community, it changes the world, literally. And so I would call it the life of a bee.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that answer, Audrey. I think that gives a great glimpse into who you are and what truly transpired within you being so passionate about your own mental health and impacting the lives around you. It's been such a pleasure interviewing you and sharing a little bit about the work that you do. I definitely think we'll have another conversation or collaboration in order to continue this important conversation around mental health and why it's so important within collegiate athletes, why it's so important within young women today. So I thank you for being on here as the 25th guest of the Mental Insights podcast.
Yes, thank you. And congratulations to you for spreading this word and being someone who's in the 20s and really speaking to your generation. That is going to go far and beyond. So thank you for doing your work too.
Thank you, Audrey. I really appreciate it. It's truly a pleasure.